Welcome back to the Free Mouse MC YouTube channel, and we're today going to talk about aggression towards motorcycle riders. And that not out of nowhere, but because of an incident that recently went quite viral in the media, because a clip surfaced of the actor Alan Ritchson, the dude from Reacher, beating the brakes of his neighbor basically, and later on his dash cam released, where you could see how that came to be, and then you see that he basically got shoved off his motorcycle multiple times and attacked by his neighbor, and that was the whole context to the situation. So the whole public opinion on this spun around a few times. And I think it's a good chance to talk about aggression towards motorcycle riders, because if you ride a bike, like myself, you're going to have experienced this kind of situation multiple times for yourself, and it's, when riding a motorcycle, a genuine issue, and I think it comes from multiple factors, from the motorcycle community itself, from how it's perceived, and basically our culture around traffic. So let's talk about it. First of all, the incident that happened: Alan Ritchson was driving down his residential road close to his home at I think between 22 27 miles an hour, and his neighbor stepped in front of him, stopping him, and he went over the handlebars because he stepped in front of him that abruptly and accused him of driving like a maniac. We will get to that one in a second, because that is, I think, up until now, this is a common experience. Like, this happens to everyone every year, at least to me as well. However, the situation then continues with them shoving each other back and forth, which is kind of understandable after going over your handlebars, and Alan Ritchson got shoved first. He then gets back on his bike, gets shoved off the bike again, and then it ends up in a full-on brawl. That's, of course, an extreme situation that hopefully doesn't happen to any one of you watching. However, these things can occur. Actually, in this situation, we already see the first thing that often leads to conflict with between motorcycle riders and people who don't ride motorcycles, and that is motorcycles are perceived quicker than they are because of their engine sounds. Because a motorcycle engine really often is quite high revving and really loud, especially if you try to drive it slow in a lower gear, because it's the way that motorcycles are geared, and that often leads to them being perceived as quicker than they are and people becoming mad at you. I know this situation myself, sometimes even with just standing at the stoplight and I have someone pull out their phone and film me and tell me that they're going to report me to the police or something because of my exhaust, even though I have a stock exhaust on my motorcycle. Which also brings us to the next thing. Aggression towards motorcycles is differently common in different countries. I think a lot of this also depends on how motorcycles are perceived in a country based on the fact if they're used for recreational purposes or for transportation. Because if they're mainly used for recreational use, then a lot of people who then use them every day and actually for transportation can get into trouble for the way a motorcycle needs to be operated. Because I think one thing that leads to a lot of conflict for everyone who rides a motorcycle is the situation of city traffic. For everyone who doesn't ride a motorcycle, a short explanation on how a motorcycle engine works. Motorcycle engines are a lot smaller in cc, but a lot more high revving, and the way they produce power is a lot closer to a race engine because they work with a lot less cc. That has the problem that these engines, if they stand still, get hot. And they get really hot and they will break. So if you're in a traffic jam, you're kind of forced to filter through. A whole other thing is you're in motorcycle gear, that gets hot, the bike gets hot from below, and also it's actually kind of better for everyone if motorcycle riders filter through to the front, because it leaves more room for everyone, it leads to less congestion, and if it's a lot of motorcycle riders, this can actually highly increase the flow of traffic in a city, looking at a city like Paris. However, for many people, the second point of confrontation comes with that, because in some countries people are really fine with people filtering through, in others they are not. And when they are not, really often the majority of people is fine with it, but it then takes a few bad apples to ruin it for everyone. A good example is actually my home country, Germany. In Germany, filtering through is highly frowned upon. And also road rage is an issue. People get angry in traffic, and that's why there's a specific category of videos online labeled German road rage videos. And that often in combination leads to nasty situations of people who filter in Germany filter a lot slower, because the chance of someone opening the door with the intent of physically harming, potentially killing you, is real. And that's kind of also where culture of a country ties in. In my home country, there's a lot of complaining about motorcycle riders really quickly, also because of the media representation that they get, because the majority of documentaries on motorcycle riders is framed really, really negatively, and it frames motorcycle riders in a really bad light. And then there's the whole thing, they're moving past people who are sitting in traffic. People are already angry in traffic, and then they feel like someone is cutting in line in front of them. So that, of course, increases the anger. And I think another thing that ties into people getting angry quickly at motorcycle riders is the concept of panoptism in a society on how to obey rules. Panoptism is a term coined by the French philosopher Michel Foucault, who described how some prisons, I think in Spain, were structured that they basically had all the cells in a round circle, basically with the prisoners surveilling themselves. And a lot of rules that like exist in society get like enforced through a similar system. For example, jaywalking. In some countries that had more experience with authoritarian governments or leaders in the past, like in the last 100 years, you really often see a lot less jaywalking. And I, like, when traveling, always saw that, and I think it's because people basically enforce the rule of like stopping at the red light as a like pedestrian in between each other. And then there's motorcycle riders and traffic law. Motorcycles in many ways are in a modern society a little bit something of the whole traffic structure that still feels very Wild West-ish. Because it leads to the situation that in a time where newly registered cars need a system that beeps if you drive too fast, you also have people like myself that have a motorcycle with no ABS, no traction control, built together in their garage with the only electric being the light and the blinkers. That's a really huge gap, and going back to the concept of panoptism, if you then basically are forced to obey all these rules, it makes sense that people get angry at people who don't. And then if you look at how motorcycles are driving in traffic, cutting through traffic and all these kind of things, people will get angry. And in a way that also can be a little bit motorcycle riders' fault to some degree, because people sometimes drive like nuisances on these machines, and I think it's important to be a little bit self-aware of your own behavior and how people might react to it, and also calm it down a little bit. As in, if you're in a like city environment where you need to get somewhere and there's a lot of traffic, I think it's fine to filter through and overtake in a respectful manner and get through. Just don't give people the effect of like passing them like they're standing still. That can lead to people being upset. I know that myself from like sitting in a car and just driving, and a motorcycle zooms past me in a way that I'd like get the shit scared out of me. Of course, also a little bit the rebel-like perception that motorcycle riders have in society through media, through films like Easy Rider, through basically The Wild One and all these kind of things, and also motorcycle outlaw culture that then gets like plastered across the news. Motorcycles can have a little bit of a bad reputation for people who are not really that much in the know of that kind of hobby, because I feel like motorcycle riders are often perceived as like half outlaw kind of people, even though in real life, not to sound mean, but the majority of motorcycle riders is quite dorky people. Like, we love our little bikes, the little like nuances of them. We love little bikes and like bikes with certain characteristics, and then people kind of talk about them, and it's almost like playing Magic the Gathering, just like with things outside. And so it's actually very far away from that perception. But of course, these kind of prejudices that exist kind of are influencing people's behavior towards motorcycle riders. And then in like day-to-day life where they're confronted with motorcycle riders, it's really often in traffic or in their residential area where a lot of like anger is already built up, which then can lead to nasty situations. I've experienced this myself. One situation especially comes to mind. I used to study in East Germany, and I filtered through traffic on a day where it was really, really, really hot and traffic was standing still. It was braking the bike or filtering through. And I filtered through all the way to the front, and I got off my bike, and a dude in a VW Polo got out of his car instantly started throwing hands, but like not in a proper way. He was like kind of hammer fisting against me, and it was not really something where you like instantly punch someone or something. But he had so much anger, and he insulted me and wished me death, basically. That's something that happens pretty quickly in Germany, that people basically tell people to hit their head on a curb and shit like that when it comes to motorcycle riding, which is really problematic. And like, it felt so much like this was not about me. Like, he did that, but like I very quickly felt like, damn, I'm just like the vessel for this shit right now that he has built up over the last 2 years of whatever the fuck he's going through. And I feel like this is a common occurrence. In that situation, I was close to having the bike fall over, and I changed my demeanor and got myself up straight and stood up from the bike. Not getting fully off the bike, but basically it was enough to de-escalate the situation and for the other person to back off. But things like that happen, and I think one thing that can really help prevent this from happening is wearing a tinted visor or wearing sunglasses in your helmet. For city riding, that's one of my go-to tips. It massively reduces aggression. Like, people really don't like messing or insulting or attacking people where they can't see the eyes. So that's a really good tip. I think to some degree you have to get comfortable with these things happening. The most common situation where I'm always somewhat worried about aggression on a motorcycle is when I'm right in front of my apartment and want to get my bike inside and standing on the sidewalk for a short second. Every pedestrian that walks by is always like, oh, where's the bike standing there? And it happens so often that I always, for a long time, had the tension of when I see someone walk up already. However, you get to a point where you just stop caring about it. I wish that people would understand more that motorcycles are a mean of transportation that can be very practical in the city, and a lot of people use it because it's easier to find parking, it's easier to get around, it's cheaper, and all these other reasons that are really strongly like good reasons for riding a motorcycle, and then we'll just accept them as a normal way of transportation. I think another topic that causes a lot of aggression towards motorcycle riding is that the car as a form of transportation has become part of the culture war. Basically, people defend driving a car everywhere with tooth and nail nowadays. Like, really often I have that when I'm like, for some reason, a passenger in a car, and I realize how aggressive people are towards bicycle riders. Because like bicycle riders, there's literally no reason to be aggressive towards those people. They have a like environmentally friendly way to, on a short distance, get from A to B. Like, there's nothing to be mad about at this. And if I then see how mad people get at bicycle riders, it kind of like explains also the aggression towards motorcycle riders. And I think it's important in general as a society to rethink mobility in a way where also two-wheeled machines have a bigger place, especially with like electric bicycles. They bring a lot of like, they're kind of half motorcycles. They bring a lot of mobility, especially to older folk who usually wouldn't ride a bicycle, and things like public transport and so on. And because of the strong presence of cars, basically people almost from a politics standpoint are angry, I think, against everything else that exists, and I think that also causes aggression towards motorcycle riders. But of course it's also important to really reflect your own behavior, because a lot of motorcycle riders drive really quick and then get angry if someone cuts them off. Where I'm like, how is someone supposed to see you coming if you go 50 over the speed limit? And if you go that quick, people are also going to be mad at you justifiably to some degree. It's a bit of a weird spot because, let's be honest, no one buys a motorcycle to go the speed limit. Like, I know we all pretend that we use motorcycles in a reasonable manner, but from the 60-year-old guy who owns like a Honda Shadow to the like Ducati Panigale owner, I think they both have like a, let's say, casual relationship with the speed limit. So of course conflict is a little bit already involved in that, and I think the biggest points where we can actually reduce the potential of conflict through conversation, through advocating for lane splitting laws, and basically through being respectful with not having the loudest exhaust, because in many ways having a loud exhaust is actually troublesome to a community. I recently experienced that. I went to Amsterdam, and Amsterdam mostly banned, I think, gas-powered cars from its inner city. They're mostly like electric vehicles now, and it's so calm. It's so nice. You only hear bicycles, you hear the boats, like the like splashing through the water, hear people talking, and it's a lot nicer of an experience. Even though I love cars and I love motorcycles, I have to admit, exhausts can kind of suck in some regards. So I myself keep a stock exhaust on my motorcycle for respecting other people, and I think it's a good idea to do so. Or if you modify it within reason, that it's not like crazy loud. With earlier talking about the incident that happened to Alan Ritchson, I think it's important to note that a physical altercation should try to be avoided at all cost, and basically only go there if you're being attacked yourself when you need to defend yourself. Because so many of the video clips that you see online of like crazy road rage moments shows people then getting into physical altercation. That also goes for mirrors. Don't hit people's mirrors. You can injure your own hand. Don't continue escalating something. However, when it comes to things getting physical, I want to give one tip on your hand specifically for motorcycle riders, and that is, if you can't avoid it, get some distance and take the helmet off, because the helmet massively reduces your head movement, and also you can get choked out with that thing. And potentially in a scuffle that kind of gets complicated and ends up on the ground, you also could get choked out with your own helmet without the other person realizing it, potentially killing you in the process. Like, that can genuinely be dangerous. So take the helmet off, and try to avoid a situation like this. Be nice to other people, try to act de-escalating, and maybe see the perspective of other people as well. And for everyone who's not riding a motorcycle, who has stumbled across this video, I hope you also now have an understanding of the perspective of the motorcycle rider, to hopefully have less conflict in the world when it comes to motorcycle riding. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and definitely like and subscribe, and see you in the next video.